Okay. Here we begin the portion of Noach. At the end of the portion of Bereshis, the Torah tells us that Lemech, who was the son of Meshuselach was a human being. No one lived as long as Meshuselach. Lemech and Meshuselach was an exceptional tzaddik, and God even postponed the great flood for 7 days, so the mourning period for Meshuselach should be observed out of respect. Only then did the flood waters come. Did it begin raining? Noach was the son of Lemech. And the Torah says that Lemech had Noach, and he's referred to as Bain. He had a son. The first time the word Bain is mentioned, he had a Bain, or Ben, but it's with a tzere, 2 dots. So Rashi explains, why was Noach called Bain? First time the Torah uses that term. Abbas is a daughter, Bain is a son. Why is he referred to as Bain? Shu binyano shalolam, because he will be the structure of the future of the world. From him, the world will emanate. Because as we read this narrative, the world failed, the world was destroyed. Who was the continuum of existence? Noach and his 3 sons and their wives. So Noach is binyano shel olam. He is the basis for the world to exist. He's the infrastructure of existence. That's Bain. That's what it was alluding to. And the Torah tells us that at the age of 500, he fathered 3 children. Not simultaneously. Shem, Chom, and Yefes. 3 sons. Shem being the most special. Yefes being the mediocre son. And Chom being ultimately turning out to be the evil son. These are the 3 sons he had. We know there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. And yet, the Torah repeats itself. So at the end of the portion of Bereshis, Torah says he had 3 sons and identifies them. Shem, Chom, and Yefes. And here at the beginning of portion of Noach, it says these are the progeny of Noach. And it says, Shem, Chom, and Yefes. Yolid Noach Shlosha Bonim. He had 3 sons. Es Shem, Es Chom, Es Yefes. Why the repetition? So over here, the Sepharno says something very interesting. Until the age of 500, Noach was not able to father a child. Although in those years, people began having families after the age of 100. Noach, it was delayed until he was 500 years. Why? So Rashi offers a reason over there. And name it a midrash, because if they would have been evil and they were over 100 years old, when a person lives till 700, 800, 900 years, when do you enter into adulthood? At the age of 100. So therefore, if they're evil and they're less than 100, they're not culpable. And they're not held liable for their misbehavior. So God wanted that in case they don't toe the line as they should, and they behave evilly, they will not be culpable for punishment, and they'll survive the great flood. And if they're tzaddikim, and if they're devoutly righteous, because of each one's special uniqueness, one teva, one ark wouldn't have been enough. You'd have to build an ark for each one of them. So rather than building an ark for each one of them, we have one ark. They're under the auspices of their father because they're all considered minors. And therefore, Noach did not have children to the age of 500. This is Rashi citing the Midrash at the end of the portion of Bereshis. The Sepharno says, we find over here, the Torah tells us, identifies who's Noach. He's a tzaddik, he's devoutly, he's righteous, Tobim, he's perfect. in his generations, and God walked with Noach. So he's a special holy man. What's Esalukim Esalech Noach? What is the meaning of that? So the Sforno says he did outreach. At the age of 500, he began doing outreach. And Torah juxtaposes to that fact. And Noach fathered 3 sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafes. So what's the Torah? Through the juxtaposition, what do we learn from this? In what merit did Noach have children? In the merit that he did outreach. Really, he wasn't meant to have children. Why did he merit the ability to have children? Because that because he began to do kiruv, in the words of the Sephardo, therefore he merited to have the 3 sons. Meaning, factually, he had 3 sons, but in the end of Bereshit, it doesn't tell us what was the basis to have the 3 sons. Here, the Torah is identifying, because we're speaking about the building of the ark, which was the beginning of the major outreach, which he engaged in this for 120 years, to try to turn the tide of the generation, because they were evil, and maybe through his entering into dialogue with them, he'd be able to convince them to change their errant ways. He didn't succeed. But in the merit of that initiative, he merited to have 3 sons. Okay? David HaMelech tells us, King David tells us in Tehillim, why did God create existence? Why? If God is perfect on an absolute level, that means God has no needs. There's no deficiency in God. So if God is perfect at the absolute level, what was the need? The word need has no relevance to God. Need means you need something. You're satisfying something which is lacking. But if God is not needy, because God is perfect on an absolute level, so he needs nothing. So what was the impetus to create existence? David says, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. It was purely to do indiscriminate kindness by creating a world and creating a human being who has free choice, who's in the image of God, where it's only due to his initiative, does he do good or evil? If he meets the challenges of life, he'll be the beneficiary of the ultimate good. What's the ultimate good? Ultimate good means he'll have a relationship with God. God being absolute, well, we speak good, he's good on the absolute level. So to be able to have a relationship with God, if you're worthy, you merit the ultimate. Because someone who's good does good. Not because it's a need, it's just a reality. So it's Olam Chesed Yiboneh. Why did God create the world? Purely Chesed. Avraham Avinu, I would say, without what we're going to say in a moment, being the first patriarch, introducing monotheism to existence, I would say that just as the impetus for existence was Chesed, Avraham Avinu assumed the attribute of God of Chesed because he's the first of the patriarchs. Where does it all begin? It begins with Chesed, indiscriminate kindness. That's why that was his attribute. Because as existence began with Chesed, from ex nihilo, Avram began with Chesed, because that's emulating God at that ultimate level. That's what seemingly you would say, and you could say that. But it's even more profound than that. I mentioned the Gemara tells us that every day there's a heavenly voice that comes out from Sinai that announces to the world, Kolo Mkulo Nizan Bishul Chanina B'nei. The whole world is sustained in the merit of Reb Chanina ben Dosa. Shedailo bekav charu b'me'er Shabbos at Erev Shabbos, which Chanina ben Dosa, in terms of his personal sustenance, he had enough. He could live on a small measure of carob from Friday to Friday. Erev Shabbos at Erev Shabbos. It's below the subsistence living. It's below the poverty line. He literally lived on the brink of survival, but it was enough. Rav Chini ben Dosa was enough. And his merit that he has nothing, the whole world is sustained. The whole world is sustained. Could you imagine? He has nothing, but because that was sufficient for him, and that merit, the whole world is sustained. So the person who gouges himself, who has the ability to write any check, why does he have that level of bounty? In the merit of Chanina ben Dosa. That God sustains the world. The merit of Chanina ben Dosa. There's a question which Rav Chaim Volozhiner asks in his commentary on Pirkei Avos. We read in the Mishnah at the beginning, in the first chapter, Pirkei Avos, the world stands on three principles. Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasodim. Study of Torah, the service of Hashem, and doing acts of living kindness, loving kindness. So he'd say, person's a great tzaddik. He's able to do Torah, studies Torah. A person of that caliber, he's able to serve God. Avodah, exceptional. But Gemilas Chasodim, how does he do Gemilas Chesed? Even though the Gemara tells us, Gemilas Chasodim, acts of loving kindness is bein b'gufu, bein b'mamono. You can do it yourself, or for a service, or you can do it with your assets, with your possessions. Rav Chini ben Dosa, he lived and survived on a small measure of carrot from Friday to Friday, Erev Shabbos and Erev Shabbos. The man didn't have not two nickels to rub together. He didn't have two pennies to rub together. So how did he do chesed? How did he do chesed? So Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes, the greatest Baal Chesed in the history of existence of Rav Chanina ben Dosa, because it's only due to his level of devoutness and righteousness, the whole world was sustained. Was there ever a philanthropist as Rav Chanina ben Dosa? Nobody ever provided for existence the way he did. In his merit, the whole world is sustained. So therefore, Chanina ben Dosa is the Baal Chesed, the one who does Chesed, par excellence. Nobody is able to match him. That's Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Okay? When Avram came on the scene, Avram was born into a pagan world. God was an unknown entity. Avram discovered God at the age of 3 years old, which we'll discuss next week. Avram sacrificed to God. He was willing to die for God. He merited many miracles. And he took on the world single-handedly. That was Avram. If Avram wouldn't have been the founding father of the Jewish people, and he would have offered his Torah to all the nations of the world, and there wouldn't have been a nation such as the Jewish people, and everybody would have said, we're not interested, what would have been? The world would have reverted back to pre-existence. Because if not for the objective, which is Torah, and a nation has the capacity, there is no existence. So why is there a Jewish people? Because there was an Avraham Avinu. Because Avraham Avinu recognized God, and he espoused monotheism, and he met 10 challenges, which are the Asar Nisyonos, the 10 challenges, tests that he was tested. He merited, he had a Yitzchak, who was the second patriarch, and Yitzchak had a Yaakov, who was the chosen of the patriarchs. And ultimately, from there evolved a Jewish people who stood at Sinai, who had said Nasa v'nishma. They accepted the Torah unequivocally. That's where the Torah took on a permanence. So all humanity that are beneficiaries of life, who is the cause of that? You know who's the cause of that? That's Avraham Avinu. Because Avraham Avinu wouldn't have chosen to put himself out there to make the impact on the world as he did. He could have been a pagan like the rest of them. He could have gone into the kiln and not come out of the kiln. But he chose, because who he was, to go into the kiln Therefore, he merited the miracle to come out of the kiln, which ultimately to be established as the one to counter all evil in existence. So why is there a world? Why is there a world? Because God created the world. We say in the Amida, God sustains life with chesed. But why does God continue to sustain life with chesed? Only because there's a Jewish people. But why is there a Jewish people? Because Avram initially had recognized God and gave the world value that the objective of purpose was going to be met. So what is Avram in his reality? He's the pillar of loving kindness. Because everything that emanates, that follows from Avram is chesed. Therefore, that was his attribute. That was the launching pad. The launching pad of Avram was chesed. Once he was there, he expanded it. He did his espousal through hospitality. There's no person, Chazal tell us, the Midrash tells us, who entered into Avram's tent, a pagan who did not walk out a monotheist. There was no challenge that he couldn't meet. There's no question he couldn't answer. And he was convincing to the point that a person was able to internalize his response. And this is what we speak about, Hadnefesh Osu B'Choron. When he left Mesopotamia, Choron, he left with the converts that he converted to monotheism. Rambam writes he had tens of thousands of people as followers. These were the souls that Avram made in Choron. Hadnefesh Osu B'Choron. So Avram himself is the Amud HaChesed. He's the pillar of loving kindness. Noach, if Noach would have had no children, we read last week's reading. Why did Noach survive the great flood? Because Noach motza chen b'nei Hashem. He found special favor in God's eyes. But what about if he would have survived, but he had no children? What would have been? It's all futile. You're going nowhere. There is no future. So why did he merit a future? And the future are his children. As much as it was Motzah Chen B'nei Hashem, why did he merit children? On that the Sephardo says, because Esol Kimesalif Noach, that because he was concerned for God's glory and he engaged in outreach, trying to take pagans and better their approach to life, to be less perverted, to bring him to monotheism, although he didn't succeed, doesn't make a difference. Now, somebody once came to the Chofetz Chaim, and in Yiddish, there's a word which sounds similar to another word, but it has two different meanings. In Yiddish, to do means you say tzeton. Tzeton, that's how you say to do. Ufzeton means to accomplish. So this person comes to the Chofetz Chaim, very capable person, he says, we're going to two of this, we're going to accomplish this, we're going to accomplish that. Chofetz Chaim says, just calm down. If you tell me you're going to do that, you could do. But accomplish, that's up to God whether you accomplish or not. Two separate things. Doing, every person has the ability to do. What the outgrowth of that doing is, which is accomplishment, that's only if God wants you to succeed. That's what the Chofetz Chaim responded to this person. Although Noach failed in his objective, but initially he engaged in outreach. He took the bull by its horns. And Esel Kim Salach Noach. For that initiative, whether it succeeds or not, he hoped it would. He didn't succeed. He failed. And that, for that initiative, he merited to have children. What's the greatest kindness you could do for a person? The Mishnah tells us in Bava Metzia that if you find the lost article of a Jew, you have a Torah obligation to return that lost article. What about if you have a situation, you find the lost article of a father and lost article of another Jew who's not related to you? Whose lost article takes precedence over the other? Which one do you have to return first? So the Mishnah tells us you must return the lost article of your father before the third party. Why? Because the level of beholdenness that you have to your father is greater than third party. Why? Your father brought you into existence. You wouldn't exist if not for your father. Therefore, returning the lost article of the father takes precedence over returning the lost article to a third party. What about if you're confronted with another situation? You have a person who lost the lost article, and that person happens to be, it's called Rabbi Muvok. The majority of your Torah knowledge was culled from that person. And the other lost article is your father's lost article. Which lost article takes precedence of which? So the Mishnah tells us the lost article of your Rebbe. Why? Because the Rebbe brings you to the world to come. The father brings you into the physical life. The rabbi, the teacher who taught you the majority of your Torah knowledge, that's your ticket to the world to come, which is eternity, which is the purpose and the objective of life. As it says in Pirkei Avos, what is this world? It's a prosdor, lifnei traklin. It's a corridor. It's a corridor to a great banquet hall. This is the pass-through over here. Who brought you all the way straight into the destination to arrive? That's the Rebbe. That's the teacher. The father is brought you into physical life. There's a beholdenness, but to who are you more beholden? You're more beholden to the rabbi, to the teacher. So if a person is able to do kiruv, a person, unless somebody goes and influences him and gives him perspective of how to invest his life, what has he provided for him? There's no greater kindness. He gave that person his meaning in life. This man now, he's met the objective of his purpose. He becomes part of eternity. If he misses the boat, as they say, then his existence is a limited existence. So what chesed is the greatest chesed you can provide for a fellow Jew? More than anything in the world. Bring him to truth. Allow him to appreciate who he is as a Jew, that he has a heritage, and the heritage is his heritage. That's the greatest chesed you can do with anyone. Avraham Avinu, he did chesed. The chesed was hospitality. The Talmud tells us that Avram's hospitality, in terms of the material that he provided, when he put on the table, was greater than King Solomon in the height of his power. That's the way he would host a person. Avram had tremendous wealth. But what was the real chesed? The real chesed was the conclusion of the night, when he brought that person and convinced them that paganism is false and the only true belief is monotheism. What did he provide that person at that moment? He gave him value in his existence. That's the ultimate chesed. So when a person engages in kiruv, and I'm concerned for the soul of another person, what is that initiative called? That's initiative called chesed. That's called chesed. Many years ago, there was a program in Lakewood Yeshiva for the young marrieds, and it was to train them that after studying a number of years, that they go out to communities and they become a rav, a rabbi, they become outreach people. So they needed the mentoring and the tutoring and the direction to be advised exactly how to contend with all those issues. You don't have the support systems of the yeshiva and so on and so forth. And then it was a 4-week program in the summertime, and the program repeated itself a number of summers. These people would attend a number of sessions, 3 summers, and then they would be sufficiently equipped to go out to these communities. So I was one of the people who would speak. I would travel there for a day and I would lecture to these people. So I asked the question, and I said, it's interesting. In the field of outreach, there's a tremendous burnout rate, tremendous burnout. People burn out. And after a few years, they give up and they go into something else. The question is why? So what I said was, people don't burn out from success. People burn out from frustration, from failing, that after what they've invested and tried to accomplish, they fell short of what they believed they were going to accomplish. And that frustration causes burnout, and they're discouraged, they leave it, they drop it. So I said to them, the question is, where do you set your goal? Where do you set the bar? Rambam codified the 13 tenets of Jewish belief, known as the 13 Ani Mamins. One of them is believing in God. One of them is believing in prophecy, believing in the authenticity of Torah, believing in reward and punishment, believing in the coming of Mashiach, believing in resurrection. These are the tenets of Jewish faith. Rambam writes, if you do not believe in them, you have no share in the world to come. No share in the world to come. It doesn't say if you don't keep Yom Kippur, you don't have a share in the world to come. It doesn't say that. You still can have a share in the world to come. If you don't observe dietary laws, you have a share in the world to come. You don't observe Shabbos, you have a share in the world to come. You can violate the whole Torah, you have a share in the world to come. If as long as you believe the 30 tenets of Jewish belief. So I said to this group, you have a person that doesn't even know what the 13 tenets of Jewish belief is, and you teach it to that person, and he accepts it and he believes it, although you haven't brought him to put on tefillin, doesn't he observe Shabbos, doesn't eat kashrus, doesn't sit in the sukkah, eats chametz on Pesach. You feel total failure. But if I tried so hard, but if you succeeded in teaching him the 13 tenets of Jewish belief, you know what you've done? You've given him a share in the world to come. He may have to be purged after he passes away for what he didn't do or did not accomplish, but in terms of the innate value of his purpose, which is eternity, he's part of eternity. That's a tremendous accomplishment. But if a person evaluates his level of accomplishment based on how many notches could I put on my belt, how many Baalei Tshuva did I make, that they're fully committed, observant Jews, tefillin, Shabbos, kosher, everything, it's not an easy thing to accomplish. That's not so simple. So if you set the bar there, there's frustration, and you feel you failed. You have burnout. But if you recognize that even the slightest degree of improvement of belief, which is only limited to 13 tenets of Judaism, you've given that person purpose and value in life, that he has a share in the world to come, it's phenomenal. Is there any greater chesed than that? You've given the man his life. You've given him his purpose. That's kiruv. So the question, when we do kiruv, what do we do kiruv? Do we do kiruv for us? Because we want to be heroes, succeed, or do we do kiruv for the recipient, that he should be the beneficiary of our outreach? If you look at the individual and see what he benefits, success is phenomenal. If you look at yourself, what you tell the world, you say, what have you accomplished? He's the same unobservant Jew. You barely can discern between him and a non-Jew, except for what he says and what he believes. What's the value? But it has tremendous value. Noach, as Elokim Yisalech Noach, because he engaged in Kiruv and was concerned for the members of his generation to bring into monotheism, that the world should continue, that the world was created for God's glory, and they should recognize that there is a God. That level of chesed is not to be believed. At least the initiative. In that merit, he merited to have children. Although initially he wouldn't have had children. Therefore, that's why the Torah repeats again and juxtaposes the fathering of the three children to Esel Kim Yisalech Noach, that he himself engaged in what? In outreach to make a difference to the members of the generation. That's the understanding. There's an obvious question which is asked. The portion begins, Elu told us Noach. These are the chronicles, or these are the children of Noach. So what should have followed immediately? Noach had three sons, Shem, Cham, and Yefes. But the Torah somehow digresses. Elu told us Noach. Noach is tzaddik. He was devoutly righteous. Tobim, he was perfect. God walked with him. Here we were talking about his children. All of a sudden, you digress and talk about himself. Why? So Rashi cites the Midrash based on a verse in Mishlei in Proverbs, where Shlomo Melech says, Zechet tzaddik livrocha. When you mention a tzaddik, you have to identify him in the context of blessing. He's a blessing. He's special. What about an evil person who has tremendous ability? Do you extol him for those special abilities? Shlomo Melech says, King Solomon says, Shem Rishon Yirkav. The name of the evil should rot. They should go into the dustbins of history, forgotten forever. Why? What's the reason? Why Zechet Tzaddik Livrocha? So I mentioned, I had the merit, I was very close with Rav Steinman, Zechet Tzaddik Livrocha, and a number of other people, Torah leaders. If you took a look at Rav Steinman, even a picture of him, he was a man who looked like a relic of ancient times. He's a man that barely weighed 100 pounds. He's a man who hardly ate. He's a man who didn't wear the best quality kaftan. He's a man who swayed over books. He didn't speak the king's English. He didn't speak English at all. There's no royal we with him. He was a humble man, unassuming. So if you see this man walking down the street, what would you say? He's a man, you have to find out which old age home. Where's his residence? But once you understand who he is, Zechet Tzaddik Livrocha, identify the man. This man is a giant. He may look like a relic, but he's a giant. He's a sage, Torah sage. He has sage wisdom. He's one of God's favorites. His blessing has special value. That when he blesses you, very often, or most of it, if you're worthy, you have a return on that blessing. That's how special he is. But how am I supposed to know? He has to be identified. Because everything is what? Is a relationship. The more you cull from that person, the greater you're a beneficiary of that relationship. But you have to know who he is. The Chazon Ish writes that as the angels came to Avram, they were angels in human form. You have people who walk the face of this earth. They're angels in human form. That's the level of devoutness and righteousness they are. And they are repositories of Torah knowledge. And it's something not to be believed. They are humans who are really angels in human form. That's all they are. That's Zechet Tzaddik Livrocha. So before we start speaking about Noach having children, these are the children of Noach. But let's understand who Noach is. And to make that point, the digression alerts us to take note. This man is not an ordinary man. He took on the generation. He gave 120 years of his life, plus more, to be concerned about his generation. And therefore, he was the lone survivor, the sole survivor, besides his children and the wives of the previous generation. That's who Noach was. Ish Tzaddik, Tomim, the Dorosov. Now it's interesting. The Torah identifies him as Ish Tzaddik, Tobi B'Dorosa, in his generations. What exactly is the connotation in his generations? You know, a person is brought up as a ghetto child, and he lives among criminals, uncouth people. He turns out to be a refined, ethical, moral human being. It's unbelievable. It's almost miraculous. With that kind of environment, those kinds of role models, to turn out as he turned out, it's not to be believed, despite the environment. So that comment is a very praiseworthy comment. But factually speaking, if that person would have been brought up in an environment which is conducive to all that, he would have even been greater. The first is, despite that, he is special. Could he have been more special? If he would have been in a better environment, he would have been more special. Well, let's have an equivalent case situation. Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was born into a pagan environment, similar to Noach. Who is greater? Avram and Noach. Noach could not hold the candle to Avram. So what are we saying? So it's praiseworthy for what he accomplished. But if you compare it to Avram Avinu, Abraham, the founding patriarch of the Jewish people, he pales in his presence. He's barely noticed. So then you say in his generations, he's special. But if he be in the generation of Avram, he'd be nothing. What do we say? No. That may be the truth. That may be the case. Avram was greater, but he's still special. We're pointing out how special, despite the negative environment where he could have gone in the other direction, despite that, he still was special. That's the B'Dorosa in his generations. We know there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. In this first verse in the Torah, the word Noach, which was his name, is mentioned 3 times. Seems to be unnecessary. We could have used the pronoun. El told us Noach, okay? If we could have said, V'hu tzaddik, and he was a tzaddik. No, but it says, the Noach is tzaddik. And then again, we mention his name the 3rd time, Noach. Why is his name mentioned 3 times in one verse? Seemingly, it's an obvious question. Understanding that there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. So the Midrash says something profound. The reason why his name is mentioned 3 times in the Torah is to tell us that Noach lived in 3 eras. He existed in 3 eras. Pre-flood, during the flood, post-flood. So that's what the word Noach, the appellation, Noach, there was Noach A, Noach B, and Noach C. Pre-flood, it was Noach. He was building the ark. He was involved in outreach, trying to convince his generation to repent. He failed. Then there was Noach in the ark. He gathered all the food. If you read the Midrash, there wasn't a moment, day or night, that he had a piece of a moment. He was engaged feeding the animals and all the species. He was a zookeeper and beyond. Post Great Flood, he comes into a world. All humanity that pre-existed the Great Flood is no longer there. That is the 3rd Noah. He's living in a 3rd era. He's a man who spanned 3 eras. Therefore, that's why the name Noach is mentioned 3 times. Seemingly, sounds pretty good. Good answer. But the question is, if you read the narrative, without him being identified as Noach each time, I would know the same thing. Noach lived pre-flood, during the flood, and post-flood. By identifying him as Noach each time, how does that change my understanding of what was going on? He lived pre-flood. This is when he built the ark for 120 years, engaged with members of the generation. He gathered all life into the ark, 2 of every of the non-kosher species, 7 of the kosher species, gathered the food, was there for a year, comes out after a year. It's Noach, post-flood, new beginning. By adding Noach 3 times, how does that somehow elucidate it and gives a greater grasp of reality, what went on? That's my question. So I think the way we have to understand it is this. Noach, no question, was a special individual. He failed. He did not bring the generation to repent, and therefore the world was destroyed. He did fail. But even for what he was, to be able to assume this level of this Herculean responsibility to change the world, you have to have a certain degree of capability. Otherwise, you're not qualified. And to engage continuously and to be involved in dialogue, besides all the other administrative skills that he needed, the building of the ark and so on and so forth. Okay? If you have 3 individuals, one is an architect. He's the equivalent of Iron Pay, architectural firm. And the other person, his name is Noach. He's the equivalent of Albert Einstein, physicist. And the third person is Mark Spitz, the Olympic swimmer. But they all have the same name, Noach, Noach, Noach. Are they the same person? Could the Olympic swimmer be the Einstein? Could the Einstein be the architect, Ian Pay? Can't. They're 3 individuals, but they all have the same name. Don't you think there's some kind of commonality between them because they all have the same name? What does the same name have to who they are? The difference in day and night, that's how there's a difference between each one of these individuals. Each one's a different reality. You know what the Torah is telling us? Each of the roles that Noach filled, pre-flood, during flood, post-flood, it's a different reality of a human being. To be able to transition to every one of these roles, it's nearly an impossibility. The Torah is telling us he was able to accomplish that. He was one individual pre-flood. He was another individual being the zoologist, being the provider for all life. That's during that 12-month period. During the flood. Post-flood was a whole different reality. He had to assume a new level of responsibility to establish the future of existence till the end of existence. That's how different each one of these roles were. So it's not, I'm transitioning from one level to another level. This is a different reality of human being. And Torah says, Noach, 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 he's the equivalent of 3 individuals who have the same name, but have no relevance to one another. That's how great he was. So as much as he failed initially, we don't take away from him, minimize the reality of who he was. What I wanted to compare in recent times, my comparison was Rav Aaron Kotler, Zeichat Tzaddik Livrocha. Rav Aaron Kotler was the founder of the Lakewood Yeshiva. At the age of 21, Rav Aaron Kotler was a Rosh Yeshiva in a small town in Poland called Kletsk. He had students that were older than he was. He was a genius that with almost effortlessly, anything he was confronted with, he immediately had the answer and had the understanding. That's his level of genius. And this is pre-World War II. He mentored students, fathered students in terms of he took them under his wing, and he developed them. World War II breaks out. He has to flee, and he goes to Kobe, Japan, with his family and his yeshiva students, with many other yeshiva students. Now there's a question. Does he continue on to Shanghai, as the rest of them did? Or there were visas provided for him and a few other people, because they were Torah leaders, to come to the United States, to assume certain responsibilities that no one had the capacity to assume his level of responsibility, because they didn't have his capability. And he came to the United States with his family. When he came to the United States in 1941 from Kobe, Japan, he landed in San Francisco, came to New York City. Immediately, he assumed responsibility to save thousands of Jews who were being incinerated in the crematoriums in the concentration camps. Day and night, he traveled with Irving Bunin to Washington, left no political stone unturned, raised mega dollars to buy lives of Jews, and went and had to change channels of transferring money, because it was illegal to deal with the enemy, but he accomplished it. And he breathed and lived saving Jews for those years. That's what he did. This man, he was buried in the tombs of the tomes of the Talmud at a level which nobody was comparable to his understanding. All of a sudden, he's literally managing a major rescue effort. Millions of Jews are being killed. How many could we save? And he gave rulings continuously. People went on Shabbos in cars from shul to shul, synagogue, raising money, speaking about the effort, the war effort. This is Rabbi Cutler. He's a different human being. Nobody says he didn't study on his own. But in terms of the majority of his thrust of who he was, his genius was invested in this. Post-World War II. The United States pre-World War II had a very, relatively speaking, compared to what it's today, a very inferior quality of Torah education. He raised the bar, as you can't imagine, on many levels. And therefore, when they came, the Torah leaders came, the survivors after the war, the United States started at another level, much more advanced level. The students were mentored on another level, different values, different perspectives. He's the one who set that bar on every level. And he had those leadership qualities. Different person. On a global scale, not only even in Israel, he established education systems to provide education for the survivors who went to Israel. They should have a Torah, not a Jewish, a Torah education. They should be able to survive as observant Jews. Otherwise, they couldn't have survived. He was internationally impactful. Whole different reality. In my lifetime, that's the closest thing to Noach. But of course, Noach, the Torah makes it a point. It's three different individuals, but he was the same person. That's exactly, so let us not, as much as he failed, but the Torah still identifies him with repeating his name 3 times to tell us that he's one of a kind of a human being, and don't minimize his value for what he did, because factually he is the father of mankind. A non-Jew is called the Noahite. He's not called an Adamite. He is the father of humanity. All humanity emanates from his 3 children. Shem, Cham, and Yefes. We as Jews, we descend from Shem, who was the most special son of Noach. We're going to stop here now and leave